things I've heard in a long time. I love Malcolm. Right, let's get our first guest on. We're talking mushrooms right now here on the show. Would you know the difference between a harmless mushroom and a poisonous mushroom? Because experts say it's very hard to tell the difference between the toxic and non-toxic ones, and so much so the Health Protection Agency has actually issued a health warning on this subject. Now, a very good friend of this show, last seen bat watching with myself and Debbie, is Adam Lee, who's a forager from Warwickshire and is very knowledgeable on fungi. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Mollie. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and welcome home. We haven't spoken to you for a while.
Oh, it's nice to hear your voice again.
So you've got quite a long, ongoing academic interest in fungi.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I was lucky enough to be taught by somebody who was a real mushroomer during my student days, and then subsequently I went on to do some research on fungi in soils and just how ecologically important they were.
As far as this subject goes, though, Adam, and I'm sure I remember talking about this on the show 12 months ago. I mean, they can be fatal, can't they? If you don't know what you're doing, it's quite a dangerous thing, isn't it?
Well, it can be. I mean, most cases of poisoning are by simple misidentification. So, I mean, I always recommend that anybody who wants to eat a mushroom outside or forage for mushrooms should really try to get to know them first before even attempting to eat them. You need a really, really, really good field guide. In fact, I always take a couple out with me, and then I have my mushroom Bible at home. If I'm in any doubt whatsoever, even about something that, you know, I'd quite often pick, I still won't eat it, because they do change colour, sometimes look a bit different. So one has to be extremely careful, because a simple mistake can actually make you really quite ill.
Well, is it worth it then, Adam? I know, and you, as I say, you join us on this show to discuss this subject frequently, about being green, about foraging, about getting back to nature and, you know, taking the kids and getting them involved. But as far as this specific subject goes with foraging for mushrooms, is it worth it?
It is, if you have somebody who can show you the ropes to begin with. It's certainly worth it for a couple of species of mushroom which are very, very easy to identify. But the problem comes when people see something that they think looks like a normal mushroom, you know, types of mushrooms that we'd buy normally. Those are the ones which are quite easily misidentified. So, for example, a field mushroom or a wood mushroom, which looks like the ones that you might have for breakfast, can be quite easily misidentified for something like the death cap, and that says it all in the name. So I actually tend to stay away from the actual mushrooms, the ones that most of your listeners would recognise, and I tend to go for very easily recognisable mushrooms, things like the jelly ear, which looks like a cup mushroom, and that only grows on dead alder trees. So some species, completely safe. Others, if you're not at all sure, don't even pick them. What do they do to you if you are unfortunate enough to eat the wrong one? Is somebody? There was a horse whisperer who died. Was it kidney failure, liver failure? What do they do to your body? Right. Well, this chap was unfortunate enough to eat a mushroom called the death cap.
Right.
Now, the death cap is responsible for about 90% of all fatalities in Europe. It looks very much like a normal mushroom, but it's quite sickly greeny yellow. It's fatal in 20% of cases. And the symptoms after ingestion are usually nausea, sickness, vomiting, diarrhea, very severe, for about 8 to 12 hours after ingestion. Then we're looking at somebody who'll go into shock, trauma, sweats, fevers, and then they might actually get better for a bit. But the problem is that the toxins in the mushroom by that stage have actually destroyed the liver. So we're looking at liver failure and kidney failure 6 to 8 days after ingestion.
Gosh.
And the medical intervention is quite severe. So we're looking at a liver transplant or filtering the blood through charcoal or all other kinds of things. I mean, there's really no cure for that kind of mushroom poisoning. But fortunately, it is still relatively rare. So, you know, I'd be really careful about misidentifying mushrooms, because in the most severe cases, there is no cure, there is no recovery.
Well, Adam, I have a question in here, a text that came in a little bit earlier for Steve for later on after 11 for the gardening phone-in, and it's got a picture on of some It looks like it's black and white, so I can't tell the colour. But basically, Paul, who sent this in, has said, "What type of fungus this is? Is this, Molly and Steve? Is it harmful to dogs and children if touched?" And it looks like bracket fungus. It looks like it should be orange, even though it's black and white in the picture. Stuff like this. I mean, I don't know whether Steve will know, but obviously people are worried with this being in the garden, or it looks like it's growing at the bottom of a tree to me, and. As we have an example here, Paul's worried that his dogs and kids might touch it. Is that a worry in the garden?
Not particularly. If it's a bracket fungus, that's a fungus which doesn't have a stalk, doesn't have a cap, but your listeners will recognise it as a fungus which may grow out of a tree. So the name says, a bracket fungus. Now, whilst I wouldn't recommend actually eating or heavily touching a bracket fungus, most of them are perfectly safe. Some of them are completely edible. For example, chicken of the woods, that's a bracket fungus. The beefsteak is another edible fungus. So without the benefit of a photograph for me to look at, I couldn't actually identify it. But it is possibly something like the honey fungus. Now, the bracket fungi decompose dead wood on trees. Sometimes they're responsible for killing trees. I really wouldn't worry about a bracket fungus.
Well, Paul's worried in case it's touched, let alone eaten. Can that be dangerous, just touching a mushroom or fungus?
No. I mean, certainly a bracket fungus, you can touch it. It'd be absolutely fine. But, wash your hands afterwards.
Well, Adam...
I think the ones not to touch are the ones that really do look like mushrooms in the field, because they can be quite poisonous.
With the stalks. Terry's just given us a call, so the easiest way to find out if it's a field mushroom is to try and peel it from the edge to the crown. If it doesn't peel, it isn't a mushroom.
Right.
Have you heard that?
Well, I haven't heard that one before. Personally, I think I'd be looking at my field guides and looking at some of the biological features that the books describe. Personally, I'm afraid I wouldn't go with that one. You really do need to know quite a lot about mushrooms to successfully identify a field mushroom.
Well, Adam, it's fascinating speaking to you, and thank you for your time. And I think that the crux of this is to buy a book.
Yes, buy a book. And something very important, when people go out this autumn and they see mushrooms, don't kick them over. They're ecologically very important for the trees, and some of them are extremely rare. So if you do see a mushroom, take a photograph of it. If you're interested in getting into foraging, buy some field guides, study those, and when you go out, take a photograph of the mushroom, go back home and study it, and have a look.
Adam, we'll really push for time, but just one question I must just squeeze in just quickly. What do they do? What's the point of mushrooms and fungi?
Oh, they're absolutely essential. If it wasn't for mushrooms and fungi, we wouldn't be here. They rot down all the dead plant matter. So all the logs, the leaves, all the dead plant remains, they rot all of that down, and they put all the nutrients back in the soil.
Thank you very much.
Plants get all the nutrients.
Concise. Adam, no doubt we'll speak to you here on the show very shortly, very soon, should I say. Thank you very much thanks very much for your time this Sunday, though. Lovely to speak to you, Adam.
Okay, lovely to speak to you, Molly. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Adam Lee there, forager from Warwickshire.